From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew Meehan, alongside my partner, Luigi, the Professor Rosa Bianca. And today, we have a show for you that's literally going to be out of this world. What's going on, Lou?
Matt, today we're going to touch upon the final frontier. Chris Lewicki, the world's greatest advocate in the final frontier, space.
I try to be the world's greatest advocate, or maybe an advocate for the world expanding into space.
You give us 30 minutes, we'll give you the world, buddy. Come on.
All right.
Tell us, what's going on?
Well, in brief, I think it's the most exciting time to be alive if you're a space explorer. 50 years ago, landing on the moon was pretty cool, but that was everyone watching it on TV, and not too many people could do something. Only one country in the world can do that. And now we've got, private people launching other private people into space. We've got plans to go to Moon and the Mars. There's space stations being built by multiple companies. Multiple countries are exploring Venus and Mars and landing on the Moon. This is really the golden age of space.
Yeah. Chris, let me ask you one question. When did we hit that fork in the road where these mega projects were at one time state-sponsored to now being run by private enterprise?
You can probably bring it down to a single incident. In the end of the 2000s, 2009 or so, with SpaceX, very famously led by Elon Musk, took half of Elon's fortune from PayPal and made a rocket company out of it. The conventional wisdom was that in 2001, then he started that, $100 million, while it was a lot of money, was nowhere near enough money to successfully build a rocket company and launch things into space. And those people were almost right. Elon barely did it. But the biggest change, like you said, was it used to be state-sponsored activities. SpaceX, while it was privately founded, wouldn't be here today without NASA. And the biggest change was a way in which NASA writes its contracts. It's as boring as that. Instead of NASA saying, we'd like to get some cargo to the space station, we're going to give you the contract to do it. Here's the 1,100 list of rules of exactly how you need to do it and all the specifications you need to meet. Instead, what they did is say, name your price for getting stuff to the space station. Do it how you do it. Here are the brief set of rules you have to deal with, but it's like, FOB delivery. You get it there, we'll pay you when you get it there. It's your risk until the cargo arrives on our dock on the space station. And that really revolutionized commercial space in particular, because it meant that, instead of your mistakes being covered by an increase in your government contract, your mistakes were the problem of you and your shareholders and your employees. So, you had to make a smart decision of being lean versus getting the job done. And you always had to think about, delivering on what you said you were going to do, and your profit line and maybe your company's viability had that at stake. So that was really the fork in the road. And, certainly good on SpaceX, but also good on NASA. There have been a lot of other innovations and contracts that have followed that. The last 10 years has been spectacular.
Chris, let me ask you this, right? Speaking about shareholders and turning a profit, right? How are these companies expecting to profit from space exploration?
Well, the business models of the companies, really aiming for outsized returns, whether they're venture funded or privately funded, are still looking at relatively ordinary businesses. Things like providing data to support weather predictions. Weather is despite you might think it is a big government activity, there's a lot of private activity in it as well. And there are things, Earth imaging, which supports your maps from Google Maps and other products. And there are multiple companies that are now in the business of taking a picture of every square mile of the planet every day. There are things like charting how late your Christmas packages are going to be on the ships that are coming in from the ports around the world. That is a commercial business. And there's things like satellite radio and satellite TV, and probably the biggest one lately is the money that's being put into communications constellations, internet constellations like Starlink and OneWeb and Kuiper. The technology is exotic. It's huge constellations, but it's still, your internet service provider. So, that's not a new business model, but it's being executed in a new way that gives access to a much bigger market than you might have been from your cable company.
So I think, Facebook has been saying that for a while. Are they launching satellites into space to give internet to other countries?
That's something they did. That was probably 6-7 years ago. Google was doing the same. Actually, OneWeb kind of got their start around the same time, and SpaceX's interest in internet satellites was probably started around that time as well. It turns out that the founder of OneWeb actually went from Google to SpaceX to founding his own company in the path of doing that. So it's a pretty small world at that level. Facebook, of course, is, like anyone building a SaaS product, wants to get more of the world to use its product, but you have to have an internet connection,
right,
to use the product. We can give you a laptop or a tablet, but that's no good if you can't get a dial tone of bandwidth, I think is what we called it at the time. So I think, unfortunately, SpaceX's effort was stalled, and I don't know of any more recent efforts they've been working on, but they have the unfortunate distinction of being on the last SpaceX rocket that didn't make it to space, which has been quite a while ago now.
Wow.
If you remember, it blew up in the pad and there was a big fireball that had a Facebook payload on board.
Hey, Chris, I was that kid in grammar school that used to make his dioramas with the orbits of the planets, and I was always like a big space geek. But I'm in my 40s, right? Relatively in good shape, fit. What are my expectations with space over the next, within my lifetime? What kind of relationship is someone like me going to have with space over the next 40, 50 years?
Yeah, well, I think the good news is you're getting older slower than people of your age a generation or two ago. So, we fortunately are probably going to live, longer than our predecessors, but still, call it a round century that we have. In the next 40 years, I think we're going to see space travel become something that is, kind of like the exotic travel that you knew that, that one person, their rich family in town took. And they talk about the trip they took to that exotic, Pacific island, going to Tahiti or something. And they show you the pictures and they talk about it. And, you'd like to do that one day, but you're not sure how to afford it. But I think there'll be, it varies. Like, not everyone's going to go to the moon. Probably, not many people are going to go to space and orbit Earth. I think more and more people are going to do those suborbital flights. People kind of deride them as joy rides. But it's kind of similar, like, going bungee jumping or parachuting from an airplane or base jumping. It's a little bit of venture travel. But sometimes when you visit a place, you pay for that expensive helicopter ride to fly around the destination to get a good view. You certainly wouldn't do that every day. You might not even do it every trip, but it's something I think for the people who want to do it, it'll be like that one time they could afford a first class ticket on their vacation. They can afford it if they want to do it. So I think that's how space will probably be in the next 40 years, to take a bit of the hyperbole about it. I think going into orbit, going to a space hotel, from a leisure travel standpoint, is still going to be a little bit rarer. That'll be like kind of your private yacht club. A lot of people will do that. Maybe you'll know a few of them. But the really good news is ordinary people work at the yacht club. The people who work at the yacht club aren't rich, and maybe they had to go to school, maybe they had to have a few family connections to get that good job. There are going to be more and more jobs for well-trained, smart, ambitious people, and they're going to be the jobs that everyone's familiar with: maintenance, food service, laundry, engineering, tour guide, hospitality, operations, in everything that you would find on a cruise ship, frankly, you'll find on a space station. And those jobs will kind of be like, I would say even more ordinary than astronaut jobs are today. It'll be something that anyone with the right tool set and ambition can go out and get that job. So, depending on whether you want to retire into leisure, Luigi, or if you want to work, the opportunity will be available to you.
So, Chris, let me ask you this. When did you fall in love with space and get so involved and decide this was the career path that you wanted to take?
So two things I'd credit to it. One was, I watched a lot of Nova. Carl Sagan came out with Cosmos when I was going through school. And I certainly think that kindled my interest. I think I made the decision, and I went to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and built Mars rovers and helped drive them around on Mars. But I made the decision I wanted to do that when the Voyager 2 probe built by JPL flew past Neptune in 1989. And I saw that, I said, that's what I want to do. And, I need to get an aerospace engineering degree, and I want to help explore space with robots.
A lot of people that I worked with actually on Wall Street were working for NASA at some points in time, right? A lot of them became quants, right? And started trading that way as well. So it's interesting.
It's a very analytical job.
Yep. So, right now, space is getting a lot of attention between Elon and Bezos and the space race that's out there right now. There's always that classic meme. I don't know if you've seen it, where it's allegedly the only time where Elon and Jeff got together and spoke about space, and they never spoke again after that. So who do you think is going, or who do you think, which horse is in the lead right now during the space race that we're?
Well, undoubtedly, SpaceX is far in the lead, but it's not clear that being in the lead is an advantage, in whatever the space race is. There's so much infrastructure to be built. There's so many different things to do. In my opinion, I think what Blue Origin may have to do is adapt their focus from building competing launch vehicles to perhaps building things in space that need launch vehicles. And we'll see, instead of a competition, we'll see a collaboration.
I was going to say, I just think you don't have to be first to market, right? I think you got to be there when the market's ready, and the market's far from ready right now. So I agree with your point.
And I think the biggest difference between those two companies often being compared with each other, it certainly has a lot to do, of course, with their leaders and their leadership, but I think it has a lot to do with their funding. Elon is either number one or two, depending on which date you're on, the richest person in the world, because he built a very skilled, capable, profitable space company and an electric car company. More of his wealth comes from the car company than the space company. He started that company with $100 million, which is a great way to start a company if you can start it. But space is, capital intensive and high risk. And in order to get his company to be as big as it is today, he had to win contracts. He had to serve customers. He had to deliver product. He had to innovate. He had to enter new markets. Blue Origin has had a different set of resources to work with. They've had, the beneficiary of Bezos cashing in a lot of his Blue Origin stock and directly funding and allowing the company to just methodically focus for a long time on building their rockets and building the New Shepard suborbital launch vehicle, which you can buy a ticket on today. So they've had a completely different style on how they've approached it, and they've been. It seems similar because they're both working on rockets, but they're working in different areas of that same subject.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time, right? As far as the space station goes right now, I think I read somewhere that they were looking to privatize that. Did you see that somewhere?
Absolutely. They've been looking to do this for quite a while. There was an effort in the late 90s to actually privatize the former Russian space station. But for a variety of reasons, perhaps mostly political, they decided, no, it would be bad for there to be two different space stations. We don't want to compete. So let's deorbit the Russian one and focus on the International Space Station. And this is another area where NASA is, I would say, enabling the transition. There's a private company called Axiom, which is actually founded by two gentlemen who used to be directly involved in the space station. One of them was involved in training facilities and the astronauts. The other was involved in actually running the International Space Station for NASA. And they both left their former jobs and founded a company. And they got NASA to fund some of their early modules by giving them a large contract, and also by giving them contracts to help get astronauts to the space station. NASA has gone a step further, and they've started a new program called Commercial Low Earth Orbit Destinations, CLD for short. And what they're looking to do is help start, a competitive environment for more private destinations in Earth orbit. And you could think of this like when you go to a city and you do things, you have where people live, you have hotels, you have manufacturing areas, you have business centers, and they're all kind of optimized for those different uses. It would be very uncomfortable trying to do a sports event in a hotel. It just doesn't work that way. And in space, we're going to need a similar type of diversity in destinations. Maybe we'll have one destination that is just really focused on science and fundamental research, and we'll have another destination which is focused on manufacturing and cranking out fiber lasers and maybe artificial hearts and organs that will help Luigi and I live longer. There'll be other places, and I'm looking forward to this. I'm really looking forward to space entertainment, because I think it's going to be the most novel and interesting thing to hit humanity in like a century. Seeing how athletic sports and how athleticism is different when you remove gravity. It'll be a lot like watching ballet, I think, but it'll be like ballet with a basketball hoop, where brute strength isn't going to be an advantage. It'll really be agility and stuff like that. So NASA is helping getting all this started, and probably the beginning of the 2030s. We're not just going to have one space station. We have two actually now. The Chinese have their own, but we'll probably have a lot of different space stations and dozens of people orbiting the Earth at any given time.
Chris, one of the themes of this conversation has been that private enterprise does business better than government does business. And I think we could probably confirm that over the last 10 to 15 years, what we've seen in space, right? If getting the mail late every day wasn't enough. But tell us, who are some of the outliers you see that are really critical partners in this space race, whether it's Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, like who's really just a cream above the rest?
A lot of the focus has been on, I would say, the first link in the chain of anything involved in space, which has been, rockets and launch vehicles. And, clearly SpaceX is way out in the lead for what they're doing. There's another company that is now public through a SPAC merger. Doesn't get as much press, but they're kind of, they started and moved into a gap that SpaceX intentionally left behind in the business, in smaller payloads going to space. And that's a company called Rocket Lab. They operate between Los Angeles and New Zealand. Their launch pad is in a beautiful, picturesque part of the island on the north end. They have very beautiful launches to watch. But they're now looking at the same types of innovation that help SpaceX scale, which is being able to reuse their rockets. What's also really interesting about Rocket Lab is they are capturing more of the stack of the value chain. So where SpaceX built a reusable rocket and then built a capsule on it and then put people in that capsule and kind of did everything that the space shuttle did, except in a little bit different way. You send the payload on one rocket and you send the people on a different rocket. Rocket Lab isn't launching people yet, but they're really launching a lot of interesting payloads. They're launching missions to the moon and Venus in the next 2 years. And there is a company who is going to be doing 3D printing in space and manufacturing new types of fiber optics, which are exceedingly better than fiber optics that you can make on Earth. Rocket Lab is involved because they, in effect, are the business park on which that 3D printing company is building its facility. So, in space, you have to provide power and you have to point the thing the right way. And, it's important to be able to get from point A to point B. If you're going to bring something back to Earth, you need to be able to adjust your trajectory so that you can fall back into the Earth's atmosphere. And Varda, which is this 3D printing company, doesn't need to do all those things. And that's really the if I would say there's one thing different about space today than 10 years ago or 20 years ago, is that you don't have to invent the entire thing yourself. There are other companies who can provide the fundamental infrastructure that allows you to just kind of focus on what you need to focus. It's like when you 20 years ago, when you were starting an internet company, you had to get a T1 line, get a server, install the software. And now, you can just spin up a cloud instance, and have an intern do it because it's so simple. And your job is to write the code that runs on that cloud platform. Space isn't all the way there yet.
No, Chris, you mentioned infrastructure, but do you foresee some time in the near future where we can actually get there without blowing stuff up? I mean, is there some other technology that will allow us to travel at those high speeds necessary to break that orbital thrust necessary?
Yeah, well, there's two different technologies right now, but I guess it's kind of a little bit of a thing. You have to get going, 28,000 miles an hour to stay in space, and you go 27,000 miles an hour. You can be 95% of the way there, but that's a ballistic missile, and no one really likes ballistic missiles. They kind of come back to the Earth and burn up. One thing. This gets a little bit broader. Like, people see the end of the space shuttle as really a terrible thing, but the space shuttle was an experiment, and what we found with that experiment was that the space shuttle wasn't really designed as safe as it could be. And with SpaceX and their Dragon, and Boeing with its Starliner, we're back to the 1960s from a design standpoint. We got this capsule. The capsule is this little tiny thing. It's not really comfortable to be in. You can really only send people up into it. But the good thing about it is, like, well, if the rocket blows up, the capsule is, easily separates from that, and maybe it doesn't get to space, but it safely parachutes back down and lands in the ocean. It's not a big deal. And so, while you might not get to where you're going, you probably won't die. Statistically speaking, it's probably going to be safer than base jumping here before too long.
Chris, I want to circle back to where you said the launch pads were, because I live in Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cape Canaveral, it's not far from me at all. Where are there certain points in the world that are better launch sites than others?
Yes, there definitely are.
And do we see like Cape Canaveral still staying where it is, or do you think those launch pads are going to move and be in different states and different cities soon?
I don't think there's any danger of Cape Canaveral losing its throne of being a good spot to launch pad. There's three general things in astrodynamics and rocket science that govern where you want to launch rockets, and it depends a little bit where you're going. Think of vinyl is back in fashion now, so I can talk about this in terms of a record. A vinyl record spins one way. And no one ever plays the vinyl record backwards. It goes clockwise. And the Earth spins in one way. And, you probably learned in school that you're actually going a couple 100 miles an hour, standing still if you're, standing near the equator, because the Earth is spinning. And it turns out that rocket scientists use that to their advantage, because it's easy to launch yourself into space and orbit the Earth in one direction than it is the other direction. So most things in orbit are actually orbiting in that vinyl record direction in one way. So that's why Cape Canaveral is where it is, because you launch something to the east. That's the direction that the Earth is spinning. The other thing is, if something bad goes with the rocket, it blows up, it just lands in the ocean, doesn't hurt anybody. It's kind of like having clearings around runways and airports. It's a safety consideration. So that's one reason why you kind of want to launch east. There's another reason. If you launch north or south, this is a lot of what the internet satellites are doing and what polar orbiting weather satellites are. And you can kind of think of like the Earth is spinning once every 24 hours. So if I orbit the Earth around the poles, I can see every spot on Earth over the course of 24 hours. And I don't need to go anywhere. I can just stay in my one orbit. But in order to do that, you don't want to launch east. You want to launch north or south. So that's why Vandenberg Air Force Base in California is a good spot, because they can launch due south and there's nothing there. It's just the Pacific Ocean. So that's another good place to put a launch pad. The last one is if you want to go to a very special orbit called geostationary orbit, and this is where your direct TV satellites are. If you see the dishes on side of apartment buildings and homes, they're always pointed in a single spot. Well, they're pointed at a spot in the sky that is at the equator, and it's so far out in space that in order to orbit the Earth, it takes an entire day. So what that means is that the satellite stays in that spot, as it would. It's even though it's going many thousands of miles an hour, it's in one spot. And to get there, the easiest place to do it is to launch from the equator, because now you don't need to turn left or right. You just go straight down the road, and you get up to geostationary orbit. So French Guiana is right near the equator, and that's a good place to launch those rockets. So that's a quick lesson on why Cape Canaveral will still be a great place to launch things east for a very long time.
I love that. I love it.
Matt, your real estate investment is safe.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Listen, this leads to an interesting thing about like real estate and space, though, because you can make similar forecasts about where interesting places to be or own property in space will be, because it's based on physics like that. Instead of saying, well, this has got a great view of the ocean, or this is located near a river, or this is located at the center of a supply chain. Those are all obvious economic things here on Earth. Well, from an astrodynamic space in space, there are obvious places to be in space.
Hey, Luigi, you know what I'm thinking? I think we have our first interplanetary real estate broker on our podcast.
Perhaps.
Hey, Chris, let me ask you this, right? And
Location, right?
Definitely.
Okay, so being around space all these years, what is your thoughts on extraterrestrial life forms?
Yeah, definitely out there, without a doubt. I'm a little bit more.
I'm sorry, Chris. I made him promise not to go there. I made him promise it. He owes me a bottle of Glenlivet now. I just want you to know I tried to hold it back.
Listen. I almost went into the moon landing was a fake, but I wasn't going into that one. So
well, that'll get me angry. Aliens, though, who's to say what they look like? Whether they have two legs and two eyes, and are upright and bipedal. We still don't know if there's life in our solar system. There might be microbial life on Mars, in the spots where there's water or energy. We're going to find out perhaps if there's evidence of life in oceans on some of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Europa and Titan and Enceladus are three interesting places. Titan, not so much for life, but Europa and Enceladus are both things where they actually have almost as much water on those tiny moons of Jupiter and Saturn as we do on the Earth. We think of the Earth as a water planet, but these moons are there's a lot of water there. So there might be life forms there. Again, it's not beaming back to Earth and talking to us, so it probably looks like microbes. Maybe if we're super lucky, it'll be fish, but we don't know that yet. But I would say the universe is. The numbers are literally astronomical and beyond our ability to comprehend. And the statistics are so likely that there are other smart, intelligent life forms that are out there. But because the universe is so vast, it's also very likely that we'll live out entire civilizations without crossing paths with each other. Maybe without even exchanging radio communications with each other. And, this is maybe an interesting phase in humanity's development. It's a big disappointment, but still, the people win the lottery. People strike it rich in Vegas. It could be possible that we'll cross paths with intelligent life sometime.
I mean, I believe in them. I think to not believe in them, I think you're a little bit crazy. So that's where I am.
Yeah,
Chris, you have a very interesting skill set. You have a huge knowledge in space. Imagine that neither finances nor technology was any limitation, and you had one final destination. Where would you go?
Well, I mean, if you gave me as much money as I needed to do anything,
Yes.
I would stay right here. Galactically speaking, And what I would do is I would essentially capture the energy of the sun to solve every problem humans have ever had. If you look at our engineering challenges, of our food distribution challenges, of our quality of life, all those things, you can get down to the cost of energy and the cost of transportation, and the energy underlies it all. And we have as many resources as we would need to do anything for 1 trillion human beings in the solar system. If we could harness all the energy we ever needed, we do whatever we want, go wherever we go. So that's the problem I'd solve first, and then all the other problems would become irrelevant.
Chris, you just nailed it. Like, you literally encapsulated the human obsession with travel and new destinations, right? And it's ultimately to achieve a better quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, let's be real. These first explorers, let's call them, that go to Mars, they're not going to have a better quality of life than they have right now. It'll be amazing, but it's the same way,
They probably have a more singular experience than most of us do.
That, probably.
Yeah, it's maybe not a condition that you'd want to live in for forever, but the idea of being under the first group of people to go past the Earth and the Moon, and perhaps die trying to get to Mars, or like the settlers at Plymouth and the early settlements, those people didn't survive the first winter. But we read about them, and we learn from their challenges. Our communications are better, so we probably learn exactly what system failed, or what crop didn't grow, or what local toxin killed us all. So we'd have much better intelligence in the 21st century than we did in the 16th century.
When do you think that happens by? When do you think we colonize Mars?
I think it's technically possible to support a settlement on Mars in the next 50 years.
Wasn't there a project where they was trying to get people to Mars by 2020 something?
There's been several of them. There's been I would say citizen-led crowdfunding campaigns and contests and things like that. But Elon Musk and SpaceX, I mean, this is their singular focus. It's why Elon founded the company. He wants humanity to be a multi-planet species, and that's what he's here on this Earth to do.
How come he hasn't been to space yet?
People are speculating more about that recently. It might be a little bit of a risk-reward trade, in that it's still a little bit risky, and it's kind of like maybe when you're a new parent, you stop base jumping, and you stop all that risky behavior you did, when you were on the dating scene. I would have to imagine it's a little bit like that for Elon, in that his long-term vision is too important to take that personal risk. Perhaps I'm being a little bit highfalutin about it. I think what's probably more realistic about it is he doesn't have the time currently to take time out of his schedule to prepare for that mission, and the distraction that it would cause his companies isn't worth the potential cost to their future success. You can imagine, Tesla as a publicly held company, how would you feel if the CEO is taking this huge risk and taking a half of his year to go do this entertainment thing?
Chris, I won't allow Matthew to jaywalk. Are you kidding me?
So I think at the moment it's just prudent majority shareholder behavior. But I think I would have to say we'll see Elon take a trip in the next 10 years. As he's got more lieutenants, and as they're far along their roadmap, and as their leadership is established or unassailable, they're not default winners still, even at this pace, even when it looks like they're doing pretty well. They still got a lot of hard things to do, and full self-driving beta will be out in the next 2 weeks. any time. So things always take longer than you expect.
So Chris, we really appreciate your time. We're just about running out here. Can you tell everybody where they could find you and where they can follow you on the socials?
Mostly I'm just on the socials now. I give public talks. I'm in the process of figuring out what company ensconces kind of my future vision and things, whether it's a space energy company, space manufacturing, industrialization, or infrastructure. But
I think it's real estate.
Yeah, it could be real estate. Well, that was my previous company.
You should set up the first You'll be the first.
Mhm.
The first interplanetary space brokerage.
Could be, yeah. There's a space commodities fund, which is related to that. And asteroid mining ultimately is a real estate game. Finding the first mine site that is going to provide the natural resources for off-planet living and industry. But if you want to
Well,
follow my opinions, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Interplanetary, and muse on all kinds of things there.
I love that. Thanks so much, Chris. One question before I let you run, right? And we ask this to every guest on the podcast. What does success look like to Chris Lewicki?
Great question. I think success for me looks like an economy that doesn't depend on consumers who live on Earth.
That is definitely a first. I love it. It's a great answer. Chris, we appreciate you being here. If there's anything we could ever do for you, reach out to us. And everybody, that's a wrap of another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.